Hello and welcome to the World Wanders podcast, your source for travel stories, travel destinations, and travel philosophy.
I'm Amanda.
I'm Ryan.
And we're your hosts. Hey everybody, and welcome to another episode of the World Wanders podcast. Today's episode of the podcast is brought to you by you, the listeners of the show. For those of you who have listened to the show for a while, you've probably heard these ads a couple of different times and ways, and something that we're really excited about is having this Patreon page, which is this platform where you're able to support us with just a small amount of money, and we're able to give back to you in a bigger way than just the podcast. So by joining our community on Patreon, you get cool things like one-on-one hangouts with Ryan and I, postcards from exotic places around the world, and much more. So if you want to join, head on over to patreon.com/theworldwanders. Thanks so much for your support. And another quick announcement before we dive into this episode of the show. We have an awesome online community that we've just started separate to our Facebook page. And we would love for all of you out there who are listening to the podcast to join us. And so you can find that on the show notes at theworldwanders.com, or you can just search World Wanders, a community for travelers, and we'll get you access. And it's lots of like-minded people who enjoy traveling the world. There's travel bloggers, digital nomads, people from all over who are just talking about all things travel. So we would love to see you there. Hello and welcome to another episode of the World Wanderers podcast. Today on the podcast, we are talking about what?
First impressions of Mexico City. So we've been here like 5 days. So it is a very, very first impression. But we thought it'd be interesting to talk about because we've been to so many different cities and stayed in so many different places over the past year and a half that it's kind of interesting to come to a place where things just go so well initially. And I do get such a good first impression of it. So yeah, we thought it'd be fun to talk about.
Yeah, I think the other thing with it too is we kind of, thought about maybe that as an episode idea. And then we kind of were like, no, it's too early. Like we should wait a little bit so that we've got, recommendations and some solid statements to make about Mexico City, because we have only been here for just under a week. And it's hard to make these big, prevailing statements about a place when you don't really know it, because 5 days is really not enough time to do it.
I mean, especially a city this gigantic, we've seen only a couple neighborhoods. There's so much more stuff to even feel like, oh, hey, I've even seen a chunk of Mexico City. So, but the neighborhoods we have seen and the experiences we have had have been really good so far. So do you want to just talk a little bit about your first impressions?
Yeah, so like I mentioned on last week's episode of the podcast, I was feeling a little bit anxious about coming to Mexico City. Everyone that we talked to had said really good things about it, but you read a lot of horrific things in the media, and it's a big, gigantic city, which is really intimidating and kind of overwhelming to think about. So arriving here, I felt like everything went smoothly right off the get-go. Our flight was great. We arrived, our baggage was there. Everyone was really kind to us at the airport, even though our Spanish was pretty bad. We had an Uber ride into the city. We arrived at our apartment and the host met us from Airbnb. And this is one of those Airbnb experiences where it is, completely matches expectations, if not exceeds them based on photos, which we've definitely been on the other end of it. And it's much better to be on the exceeds expectations end of it.
Yeah, it's so nice to come into an apartment that you were thinking, oh, that looks pretty nice, and you get in there and you're like, oh wow, it's so nice in here. The building's secure. The building, definitely seems stable and safe, but there's also security at the front and in a nice neighborhood that we feel comfortable walking around in. So immediately on arriving, it was oh wow, this first step went really well.
Yeah, so basically we arrived here in the afternoon. It was evening by the time we checked in, so we got a little bit acquainted with our apartment, our Airbnb, got a little bit set up, and then our host gave us a recommendation for a restaurant that's a little bit higher price point for Mexico City, but we decided to just give it a go. We're like, you know what, it's our first night, let's celebrate being in Mexico City. So we went to a restaurant called Azul in Condesa, and it was so amazing. I feel like it was a really, really great start to our time in Mexico, enjoying some enchiladas with mole and some guacamole with grasshoppers. Was it grasshoppers?
Yeah, it was grasshoppers.
Yeah, which seems to be, I guess it's from Oaxaca State. They eat grasshoppers, they're tiny, they're ground up, they're super salty. They just add a little bit of flavor. It's not as gross as you might be imagining. We've been a fan of cricket bars for over a year now, though, so we're open to it. We had some really good tequila. Just an all-around really good start, I think, to our time here.
Yeah, and it was interesting. So as we were preparing, I was kind of thinking back to other cities that we'd been to and first impressions that we got from other places. And quite a few of the cities we went to in Asia, it was the opposite effect. One that stands out in my mind was arriving in Taipei and being like, oh man, not a great first impression. But
and we also had it's like, okay, the city's a little bit glum and a little bit drab right now, but we're super tired. This could turn around. And then arriving at an Airbnb where, the whole fisheye lens has been used and you're actually staying in basically a closet.
Yeah, but the opposite effect here. So what have been a couple things that surprised you about Mexico City so far?
Okay, the thing that has surprised me the most so far has been the grocery store that we went to. I always hope for really good grocery stores when I go places, but I always try to lower my expectations, know that, it's going to be more challenging for me to find some of the comforts that I love and know at home, and know that that's just a part of the experience. So we walk into this grocery store, not anything fancy, just grocery store in the neighborhood we're staying in, and we walk down this aisle and the first thing we see is gluten-free pasta. And so I immediately grab a bag because, when will we see this again? Like, this is like a rare commodity usually in other countries. And as I'm walking, it's like, gluten-free flours, all these other gluten-free products, gluten-free bread. And I'm like, this is so cool. And we keep walking, there's quinoa, there's chia seeds, there's coconut oil, get to the vegetable section, there's kale, there's like bagged spinach for half the price of that home. And I just felt so pleased by that. I was like, wow, this is so great. Like, we can get so many of the products that we can get at home, which makes me feel really happy and, kind of adds to that, just it's easier to settle into a place where there's not as much okay, I'm going to have to adjust to this.
Yeah. And for us, because we're here
indefinitely.
Yeah, we're here for a long time, and it's like part adventure, but part trying to make ourselves feel at home. So it's not like going on a 3-week holiday out to something where we're looking for an alien experience, something that's going to really rip us out of our comfort zone. We're looking for is to be somewhere new and adventurous that's outside of our comfort zone, but definitely have the comforts and the stability to get a lot of stuff done and be productive. So having a nice grocery store near here where we can get food that's affordable was pretty cool.
Yeah. Yeah. What do you think for you?
So something that's kind of surprised me a little bit is just how, maybe not, I don't know what the best way to word it is. I wouldn't say a lack of English, but just how dominant Spanish is everywhere you go. Even into the touristic areas of the city, which we went on the weekend, shops, restaurants, places you're going into, people are going to, it's all Spanish, which is actually, great and is actually preferable to me because one of the big reasons we're here is to really improve our Spanish. So I'm excited by that. And it's been fun going into restaurants and having, awkward interactions, kind of bumbling through how to get these stuff. But just, I think coming from Asia, where you go from, especially in the big cities, almost any restaurant, cafe, whatever, your place you're going into, people are going to be serving you in English immediately. So coming here, you definitely expect, okay, Spanish would definitely be the primary method. But even when people feel you kind of blubbering about in Spanish, they'll just continue on, which is nice. And so, for example, the place we went for dinner tonight, we both really messed up some interactions where we just had that dumb white person look on our faces I don't know what is going on here. But yeah, they're just pleasant, nice, helped us along in the conversation. So that's something that's kind of been a bit surprising, but also fun and good
Yeah, it's kind of interesting that that's been one of your big surprises, because I feel like when I think about Asia, it's like, Asia is a lot of different countries, obviously. And I think that English kind of becomes like the common language that links them together globally. And I feel like the same is true for Europe. But I feel like my experience the last time we were in Latin America was very little English as well. And so I wasn't that surprised by it. But again, I've also been pleased by it too. I think that, like I was booking us dentist appointments today, and the conversation went fine. It was not good, but it was fine. Like I got what I needed. And I think that it's, you hang up the phone and it feels like you've like ran across a highway or like ran a 10K race or something. Like it's very exhausting, but it's also very rewarding, which is something that we were looking for, like having those little wins in a day. Like I was like, yes, I successfully booked a dentist appointment. Woohoo. Like, oh, I successfully ordered the latte I wanted and it came out right. But then it's also, we go for lunch and I wanted soup to start, but I missed the word and ended up with a sope, which is a small taco-esque thing. Also delicious, but not the soup that I thought I was getting.
Yeah, you definitely get like everything's more of a game, and it's like, oh, things are different. Like I get to go like play a new version of this puzzle every time I go to interact with people.
Yeah, something else that's surprised me about Mexico City so far, and that may just be the areas that we've been in so far, which have been kind of La Roma, La Condesa, and the historic district, so Distrito Historica, I think, might be what it's called. Oh, Zocalo is actually what it's called. Has been how unchaotic it's been. I kind of feel like I was preparing myself.
Well, I don't think unchaotic is a great description of it.
What would you describe it as?
Not super chaotic.
Okay.
It's certainly chaotic.
Okay. Maybe.
Anyone who, if you're coming from like Taiwan or, Thailand, maybe you'd think, oh, wow, traffic's pretty organized and calm here.
Like there are traffic lights and people relatively abide by them.
Mostly abide by them, yeah.
Nobody drives on the sidewalk.
True.
So maybe it's just coming from Asia where there's a lot of chaos happening all the time. But I feel like I kind of was like, okay, it's going to be like showing up at Bangkok where you're just like anything goes. You can just not wear pants on the street. It's fine. You can drive on the sidewalk. That's fine. You can throw a rooster on top of your motorbike. It's okay. And it seems like things are a lot more organized here, which maybe is me having not done my homework before coming here or just not really knowing much about Mexico City, but it is something that has surprised me a little bit.
Yeah. And then another pleasant surprise was finding out that the bank we bank at in Canada is actually operating in Mexico so that we can take money out and don't have to pay any fees.
Yeah, and this may seem like, if you haven't traveled long term before, it may seem like such a little thing, but bank fees can be, a couple dollars on the foreign bank end, and then your local bank will also charge you a couple dollars. So I would say on average, we get charged between $3 and $5, but I think closer to the upper end of that for every bank transaction that we did while we were in Asia. And there was no partner banks for us there. So if you imagine the fact that you use cash almost everywhere you go in developing countries and cards not used a lot there. So say you're taking out, a couple $100 every couple of weeks. Say you're taking out money twice a month. That's like $10 a month that you're paying towards bank fees. Over 6 months, that's $60. And when you're in a place that's cheap, that, is a couple nights accommodation or at least a night's accommodation. I remember the first time we traveled, I think I added up my bank fees to like $400. Like that's significant. That's more than our flights to Mexico City cost. So yeah, big thing for us. Definitely a big win. So we've been here for almost a week now, and we've had a lot of really great experiences. What do you feel like you're most excited about for the next couple of months while we're here, or next couple of months in Mexico?
I mean, so the obvious thing in the next couple of days is we're going to a concert. So I'm very excited about that.
Also getting our teeth cleaned on the same day.
Yeah, big day. Yeah, I think just like continuing to like settle in. There's nothing in particular that I'm excited about. Something that definitely like cognizant of is now that we've got a place to live and a place to work and are getting comfortable with the neighborhood that we're in, I think it could be easy to fall into a rhythm where we don't really like get as much out of our comfort zone and don't push ourselves to learn Spanish as much. So I think that's something I'm conscious of, and I'm excited to, challenge myself to get into more situations where I'm forced to practice and learn. Yeah, and I mean, over the next couple months, going to some other areas, different cities. Something that's cool about Mexico right now, at least, maybe it wasn't this way a few years ago, but very cheap flights with Interjet. So you can go to different cities for, very affordable prices. So, maybe we can do some cool weekend trips, whether that's busing somewhere close or flying somewhere further away. I'm excited for that. And just also just kind of like keep checking out different areas of the city. Something that's cool about a city this big, kind of like Tokyo in Japan, is that there's just so many different areas, right? It's like a whole bunch of different cities packed together. So on the weekend, you can go to a different area of the city, and it's a place you've never been before, and there's things that are unique about it. And Mexico City seems like it has a ton of places like that.
Yeah, I think that, to your point about getting into a rhythm where we don't get out of our comfort zone, I was thinking kind of the same thing too, because we haven't really been out of the area that we're in right now. So we're in La Condesa, which is near to La Roma, and the co-working space that we're working in is in La Roma.
Roma Norte.
Okay, so we've got about a 35-minute walk each way to the co-working space, a little bit faster, of course, if you take like an Uber or a bus or something like that. And we've kind of just, the last couple of days, we've signed up for this co-working space, and we've kind of got into a rhythm of, how that's going to work, getting to and from, and what, hours of the day we're going to work. And I think that it would be really easy to kind of just do that. And I think that this area seems to have everything that I would want. I mean, there's a yoga studio in the area, or a couple. We haven't checked them out yet, but there's a couple. The co-working space is super, super awesome. We should talk about that. And there's like a zillion restaurants that we could try. Like, we keep pinning things on Google because like we walk past it looks really good, but we've either already eaten or we have a plan for dinner, and it's like, oh, we got to try this. So I think it would be really easy to just like stay in this area and never explore elsewhere, on top of maybe not practicing Spanish.
Yeah. The nice thing about that is we have a place booked for a month, and then very shortly we're going to have to start looking for another place, which is going to take us to new areas.
Maybe.
New areas of the city. Maybe.
So one of the other things that I think would be good for us to touch on is being in Mexico City right after the big earthquake that hit. We talked about on last week's episode, Ryan mentioned that was one of his biggest anxieties and worries. And it's one of the questions I think we've got the most from like family and friends at home is, are you seeing the damage from the earthquake, and what's it like down there? And I think that the first thing to note is that this is our first time in Mexico City. So it's hard to know if, that building is condemned because there's earthquake damage that we can't see, or it's condemned because like somebody's not paying their bills, or, this street is like torn up because the earthquake damaged it, or, it was already under construction. But I think the biggest thing is like, I think like 97% of stuff seems fine. But then we round a corner, or, we turn onto a new block, or we walk onto a new street, and all of a sudden there's just like a building missing. And that feels like really intense to be here and to know that happened, and that, people lost their lives in that, and, that we're here and there's the potential of that happening again. That's kind of how I feel around that. What have your like thoughts and feelings been like?
Yeah, so it's weird because it is this mix between very much life as normal in a ton of ways, especially because we've never been here before. But the area that we're in was one of the hardest hit areas. But, all the restaurants are open, all the cafes are open, people are out drinking coffee, enjoying themselves, kind of like life as normal. And then, as we walk, I think it was probably our first night here, or a second night here, we went out walking around and came around a corner, and it was a spot that I'd seen in photos and on the news of a building that had collapsed. And it was just, we're here now almost a month since then, so there's obviously no recovery efforts, anything like that happening. Just construction and clearing out the ruins of some buildings that have collapsed. But you round a corner and there's piles of flowers. This building that you've seen that's used to be an apartment building, now it's just one story. It's very I don't know if surreal is the right word, but it's a weird experience. And then today on the way to the co-working space, we walk past another area where you can see an apartment building that's collapsed. And it's crazy to think about the people who lost their lives there, who were just, going about day-to-day life in an apartment building, and then earthquake happens, getting trapped in the building. It's terrifying to think about, and it's weird to be here in the aftermath of that, just enjoying ourselves, seeming like day-to-day normal life. I think it's obviously sad for the people who were affected, and for me at least, it's a good reminder to enjoy the days that we do have, because you never know the types of things that can happen unexpectedly.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, it is kind of interesting. It's like I feel like most of my time I'm not like thinking about it at all. Like it doesn't even cross my mind. And we've had a really, really great first couple of days here. We found some really great eats. We've had like more tacos than I think the average person would eat in 5 days, and it's been amazing. We've had so much good guac, and I found a latte for $2 today, and I feel like I've just been riding kind of this high for most of it. And it's these moments where you just walk around and you're like, whoa, like was that a building? Like that's a pile of rubble, and you see flowers, and it's really sad, like you said. And it's kind of this reminder that like, whoa, like, of course it's fine to, enjoy yourself and have fun in a place, but it's just this reminder of, shit happens, I guess.
Yeah. And then on a personal level, it's been interesting coming from, Canada, North America,
technically still in North America.
But yeah, so just dominating the news, earthquake. So as you're thinking about going to Mexico City, it's one of the only things you can think about. And like first night we were here, I was like, okay, what does like the seismic alarm sound like? Because around Mexico City, there's loudspeakers that will make some sort of noise if there's an earthquake that's happened, because they register it in advance. So, worrying about that. Okay, where do we go if there's an earthquake? Where would be the safest spot to go to? Should I have like my super valuables in arm's distance in case that happens during the night? And there was like a thing that I was worried about the first night, and a little bit less the second night, and then a little bit less the third night, and then you just stop thinking about it after a while. So now that we've gone to a co-working space and been able to talk with some people who were there, for people here, because earthquakes are more common, and 99.9% of the people came out of it okay. It's interesting to see just how unfazed a lot of people are.
Yeah, definitely. It's kind of interesting that you brought up, the perspective shift, because I feel like we've talked about that a couple different times on the podcast. And I know, if we haven't for whatever reason, we've definitely experienced it. And I think the two that come to mind to me most immediately are, one, Zika. It was this thing that was all over the media. People were very concerned for us that we were going to Asia last year. And we looked up the Zika map in our first place, Singapore. We made sure we didn't book anywhere that somebody had been affected or that somebody was ill. And that was the only place that we did that. I think maybe we looked at it in like Manila and maybe Malaysia. But within our first, I would say like 2 weeks, it was like, oh, nobody's really talking about Zika over here. So like, you just kind of forget about it. And then the second thing that comes to mind is going to South Korea and everything that's happening with North Korea. It's like, people at home are very concerned that we're making a trip to South Korea. And it's like all over the news at home. Like every single day it's on the news, something about North Korea. And we go there and it's like people in South Korea are just living their lives. Like they're not talking about what's going on constantly. And I felt like a lot less stressed about North Korea while I was in South Korea than I do when I'm like at home, which is totally the opposite of what you would think about. And it's the same thing with being here. You know, I felt very anxious before coming here, and then I come here and I feel like nobody's really like talking about.
Well, I mean, I don't think that would be necessarily fair to say, because
we don't talk to that many people.
Yeah.
Yeah, I guess maybe it's like we're not seeing as much about it. Maybe is that a more fair statement to say?
Well, just in our day-to-day life so far, it's, you know, not top of mind. And it's like, you think the association now is just like, oh, more and more days go by and there's no more earthquakes. So, you know, you definitely feel just more comfortable, even though it doesn't change the reality of what the chances of an earthquake happening or not happening. That obviously hasn't changed. But as far as just our ability to sleep at night, that's definitely gone up significantly.
Yeah, definitely. I think that's a good point. So one last thing I want to touch on quickly before we end this. We've mentioned a couple times that we are working at a co-working space. We just signed up for a membership with WeWork yesterday. So we're going to save talking a little bit more about it for a future episode when we've got more than a day and a half under our belt there. But my first impressions of the location that we're at have been really great, and I'm super excited to be working there for the next at least month, if not more months. Would you agree?
Yeah, I mean, it's been awesome so far. And we'll probably do a more in-depth working in Mexico City episode as we get more into it.
Working, quote unquote.
Not working, allegedly.
Go check out our Instagram account at the World Wonders podcast. You can go see a sunset photo from the balcony of the co-working space. It was absolutely beautiful today. All right, I think that's everything. If anyone has any questions or comments or feedback about Mexico City, definitely let us know. If anyone has been to Mexico City and you know of like the best taco guacamole spot, email us, info@theworldwanders.com. If you're in Mexico City and you want to meet up, again, send us an email. We would love to connect with any or all of you. And I think that's everything.
Yeah.
Okay, ciao.
Bye. To find more information, relevant links, and photos talked about in this week's episode, check out theworldwanders.com.
If you have a question, comment, or feedback, send us an email at info@theworldwanders.com. Join our community on Facebook at The World Wanders or on Twitter at WorldWanders1. As always, thanks so much for listening.
Have a great day.
Bye.